What's up, champs? Welcome back to Short Shifts, the twice-weekly show in between the mega Keeping Karlsson episodes each and every Sunday night. I am Louis Ezekiel, and joining me today from the Fantasy Life podcast, my good buddy, Victor Nuno. How you doing today, Victor, on this fine Tuesday evening?
I'm doing great, Louis. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to hop on for a short shift. I don't think we've had the pleasure of doing it together, though. I think I've been on with Ben.
Yeah, this is our first combo, so really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and you know what? It's getting close to American Thanksgiving, and I just want to say that fantasy hockey life is full of surprises, and just fantasy hockey just like life. And I'm thankful for the Mr. E in my life.
Well, much obliged, bud. Let's get right into things. I just want to start with something not super fantasy hockey related, but pretty cool. Some Hall of Fame congratulations in order for Daniel and Henrik Sedin, Roberto Luongo, Riikka Salonen, Herb Carnegie, and of course near and dear to our friend Brian Com's heart, Red Wings legend Daniel Alfredsson. We got some really nice humor from the Sedin twins. I want to thank whoever picked me to speak before Henrik. It reminds me of draft day, said Daniel to start his speech. And of course, from Henrik, he said, as you might know, I'm just recovered from COVID. It came down to a last minute decision to attend. But as our coaches always said, Henrik at 70% is a lot better than Daniel at 100. So nice to see those guys, at their best, really basking in the moment and, seeming to really lean in and enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. It was fun. And those guys are great and really were fun to watch. And one of the things that was interesting about this class is that it seems like there's always been this criteria of like, you have to have won the cup to get in, right? And these, all the inductees this round didn't. And what is your take on that? What are your thoughts on that, Louis? You think that should be, or should we kind of be getting over that?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I kind of like that aspect of this class just because, you know, obviously it's a team game and it's on GMs to put together these teams. And, you know, not every player has the opportunity to have a great team built around them, but that doesn't mean that they aren't great themselves. So I think it's cool to honor folks, even if they didn't maybe reach, that ultimate prize there. Great, obviously, if you can and if you do, but I don't think it should bar entry. You know, I don't think we need to be gatekeeping on the Hall of Fame. If you are a great player, you deserve to be in there, cup or no.
I totally agree. There's so many mediocre players that have their name on the cup, right? They were just part of a good organization, a good team, and that shouldn't be the criteria. And, you know, certainly Henrik and Luongo, and Alfredsson did all they could, you know, and they have some pretty impressive stats to back it up. So I'm definitely with you. I think that's a silly argument. Oh, well, they didn't win the cup, they shouldn't be in. That's get out of here with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point you make too about all the scrubs who got on the cup. So, you know, yeah, absolutely. Really cool. We got to start with some injury news. You want to start us off, Victor?
Yeah, definitely. We got Patrik Laine out 3 to 4 weeks with the ankle sprain. That's unfortunate news. He's been unfortunately back to the infirmary, and it seems like several times this season. And he only had eight games played. A little bit of a disappointment so far, but I guess the question is what to do with him. Whether you want to send some offers to the Laine owner. 4 points in 8 games, 41-point pace. He's just shooting less than half of his career norm. So it seems like there's some positive regression going to happen here. But Louis, what do you think? Would you be sending out offers for the Laine owner?
So I'm in a keeper league and I'm kind of in a rebuild, and I did send out some offers for Laine. You can let me know what you think of them. Maybe they weren't enough. I haven't heard back in the affirmative, so it sounds like I didn't offer enough. But I sent out Toffoli, who I thought maybe might be appealing with his hot 1 goal, 2 assists from Monday night. I sent out Giroux, who's been on fire recently. So we'll see if I can get anything done. I think it would be nice to have him in a keeper spot. But yeah, like you said, he's really struggled. Certainly there's room for improvement, but with how often he's been hitting the IR, it's been tough to kind of I think, find his rhythm, especially with some of the changes that have been taking place on the team. You'd love to see him and Gaudreau and whoever they end up having center them, get into a little bit of a groove, but they haven't really had that opportunity. So I think it might continue to be kind of a tough year. Certainly he can do better than he's done. He's not a half point a game player. But at the same time, I worry that, these are some crucial times to sort of find some comfort. And just, this team is ravaged with injuries, beyond Laine. I think it's just going to be a tough go for them for a while here. We did see that Emil Bemstrom was elevated to line one, power play one. He managed to put up a goal and an assist in 11 minutes in the game where Laine was injured. We imagine that when we check Frozen Tools last game lines this evening, we'll see him with more time. Should we be excited for Bemstrom with this opportunity? I have a feeling you know a little bit more about Emil Bemstrom than I do, as kind of a dynasty expert.
Yeah. Bill Bemstrom, he's been around for a while, and he's someone who we've certainly talked a little about. He's got a pretty good shot, and he certainly has some offensive ability. But he kind of has struggled quite a bit. He's got 120 games played under his belt, and he's basically been at a 20 point pace over that time. He's got 2 points in these 2 games playing right now as we speak. Maybe he'll get the short shift bump and we'll see a rise. I added him this week just because of the schedule, and the opportunity that he's having. But in general, I'm not so sure about that. I think that he's been a little bit shaky. And in our fantasy hockey Discord, I joke that he's more like Emil Bumstrom because he's been kind of a bum lately. Even though he does have this opportunity. He has a Sunday game after you're hearing this to go along with his Thursday, Saturday, which is kind of nice. Playing with Jenner and Gaudreau should be nice. But I would take the gamble on him. He's actually somebody who's, pretty good defensively, but a lot of his offensive numbers haven't really translated. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. And I wanted to circle back to Laine just real quick, if you don't mind, Lewis, because I personally have never been a big believer in him as someone who just doesn't really drive play. He really needs someone to do all that heavy lifting for him. And when he had a good center, he was really good at that. And certainly he succeeded last year in Columbus. So there's thoughts that he can do that. I definitely don't think he's a 40-point player, as you said. But I think the question is, how high can he rebound to? Toffoli, Giroux, I mean, that shouldn't be enough, right? But it kind of looks like it right now based on how things are going with how well they've been doing. Toffoli looks like a top line player, and Giroux and the offense going in Ottawa, it seems like it. I would have a hard time. I don't own Laine anywhere because of my feelings on him, but I would guess that his rebound is somewhere in the 70-point range. I'm not sure that he's a point per game player again. I thought that some of his production was inflated last year. So I would probably do that, but I'm not sure that many people would. I think a lot of people are holding on for more, but I'm just not sure it's going to be there. So yeah, that's what I'm worried about. And then the last guy that we wanted to talk about is Emil Bemstrom's former center, Jack Roslovic, healthy scratched Tuesday. I guess there's a lot going on in Columbus, and as we speak, they have 2 goals against. So we'll see how that's shaping up. But it seems like the goalies might be in for a little bit of a rough spot, eh?
Yeah, maybe if you're in a league that has some value for volume. I picked up Korpisalo because I needed a goalie who was taking some shots against. So I figure he'll be good for that at the very least. Let's jump to some happier news. An injury in Calgary with Jonathan Huberdeau returning to the lineup, playing on a third line, it looks like, with Backlund and Lewis. Thoughts on this Huberdeau return?
Yeah. Oh my. Huberdeau, there's a lot of concern there with his average time on ice. And this was kind of my concern with him moving to Calgary, Lewis. He relies on others, does Jonathan Huberdeau, to do the heavy lifting. I think in my mind, there's no question that Barkov was the one driving the bus down to Florida. I know he played some time away from Huberdeau as well. I mean, from Barkov as well, but he always had a competent center. But he really struggles to drive play by himself, does Huberdeau. And so he really needs someone to kind of do that for him. And Lindholm, I think, can be that guy, but he was also buoyed by some really strong players last year. But as you said, he's not playing with Lindholm or Kadri, so that's a little bit of a struggle. But Huberdeau is definitely a guy that's going to get his opportunities, and he's still getting them on the power play. But I think Calgary is trying to spread out their offense and have kind of three strong lines, and so that is really not good for Jonathan Huberdeau. But I guess the question is, it depends on what you were hoping from him, because I don't think that he's really what he showed last year. He's not an 120-point player. I'm not even sure he's a 100-point player, especially with this time on ice. They really leaned on their top line last year, and it seems pretty clear that Sutter is not going to do that this year. So you probably have to roll back your expectations quite a bit. But I certainly don't think it's time to hit the panic button and trade him for nothing, as it kind of seemed last week when he was doing absolutely nothing. At least he got a couple of points. But yeah, I think that you probably need to dial back your expectations. And I think my question for you, Lewis, is if you had Huberdeau and you had the opportunity to trade for a guy that was around a point per game, do you do that, or do you still think that Huberdeau can get you more than that?
I don't know. I would be awfully concerned seeing that he's down almost 3 minutes from what he was playing last year. He's only been over 17 minutes 3 times this season out of 12 games. I might, if I had like a surefire point per game guy and I had that offer, I might go for it. I don't own Huberdeau anywhere just because I, was sort of the mind that, he was not going to be able to repeat that price was going to be inflated for him. So I feel, I count myself lucky that I was out of this position. And I think that was more or less the consensus, among the folks, doing pods on this, network. So, I listened to some smart people who sort of felt like that wasn't going to be the case. But yeah, I think if I could get a surefire point per game guy, I would go for it, because I'm not sure, that JH is going to be that guy this season. All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some patron questions we got, and we've got a hot forward with crazy deployment, and we've got 3 cold defensemen that we're going to talk about. You are listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Victor, we solicited a couple questions from some of the patrons of Keeping Karlsson. Patron Edge, whose team name is Whose Laine Is It Anyway, asks, I'd be curious to get your take on Klingberg. No goals, so no shooting percent to speak of, but time on ice is up over a minute from Dallas. Is a half point per game pace about what we can expect? So Klingberg is indeed up about 90 seconds a game from last year. And about 15 of those seconds are coming on the power play. Obviously, Anaheim doesn't have the kind of power play that Dallas can send out. So while he's the undisputed quarterback in Anaheim, they rank 24th in the league in expected goals per 60 on the power play. And they're achieving, in actual production, they're down 31st. Despite all this, Klingberg does at least have an assist on 3 of the 4 goals scored on the power play while he's been on the ice. So if the Ducks power play starts regressing, back toward bottom third of the league instead of right way down in the basement, this will maybe offset a bit of a decline, because I don't think we can expect them to get in on 75% of all the goals they score on the power play. I'm just a bit worried also, that almost all of his shots, including his one wild 7-shot game, and most of his assists have come against San Jose, Vancouver, and Seattle. Is it crazy to be worried about these matchups? He's going to see these guys plenty this year. But, it makes me a little nervous that he's only really achieving against these kind of crummy teams. Any thoughts on Klingberg here?
Yeah, well, you actually mentioned something that I was exactly thinking. Yeah, he's gotten points against those bad teams, but he's going to play those bad teams over and over again. So I wouldn't be so worried about that part. And I would just say in general that I believe in Klingberg. He's a proven commodity. We were talking about this in the preseason. Yes, it's always difficult when you go to a new team and you're not really sure what to expect. And that can be a challenge. And it's obviously been a rough patch for the Ducks. There's no doubt about it. But even with his rough start, no goals on 20 shots, he's a 6% career shooter. He should have a few more, or at least a couple shots, I should say, goals. But he's already, even with all those struggles, he's around a 40-point pace, which is basically he's never done worse than a 45-point pace. And that was in the first COVID-shortened season. So I'm pretty sure he can do that and better. And you also don't play Klingberg without giving him the best offensive deployment. So unlike some guys that you might worry about that are going to get relegated, that's not going to be the case for Klingberg. He's not a defensive stalwart. He's passable in some situations, but he excels on the power play. That's where you have to have him. And the Ducks have weapons. So you have to imagine, as you said, that that's going to regress. And I think as a team, they will rebound. You mentioned the power play numbers. At even strength, the Ducks sit just ahead of the Coyotes in terms of expected goals for %. That's crazy. Behind the Blue Jackets, Flyers, Blackhawks, Red Wings, Caps, Canucks, Islanders, and Sharks. I have a feeling they're better than at least a few of those teams, if not maybe all of them. So once they get a little bit more offense going, he's going to get at least some assists and a few goals. I think he's going to get back up to that 50-point pace. And while his bash, block shots, hits isn't elite, it's generally more passable than it is right now. So I feel like that might regress a little bit positively as well. So I would be happy to acquire Klingberg right now as a buy low.
All right. I guess I'm a little more cautious, but I like what you're saying here. It's giving me some optimism, and hopefully, for Edge, it's helping him feel like maybe he can hope for a little bit more than this half point per game, that he's been able to get up to this point. And, if he can cash in with 7 shots every once in a while when he's playing, Seattle or, San Jose, you love to see it. And you're absolutely right about his deployment. This is not someone that you're going to be nervous about seeing him shuffled down the line like all of my poor fellow Hedman owners who are watching as we're seeing the annual attempt from Sergachev to kind of move up to that top spot. All right. Well, we had another patron question, and this one relates to the perfection line. Patron Rob, team name Skateful Dead. Love that. That's awesome. Asks, I know Taylor Hall got some attention on the big Sunday show, but do you guys have any David Krejci thoughts? More specifically, is he a must hold, or is he more of an only rosterable when he's on Power Play 1 or playing with Pasta? Yeah, I think obviously you want him playing with Pastrnak. That is a situation that he really thrived in, obviously, earlier in the year. But I'm not ready to declare these regular lines dead quite yet. Krejci, Hall, DeBrusk is like a pretty decent second line, I suppose, but it's not sort of why you drafted these guys where you drafted them, with the hope that they would be, lined up on the first line with Marchand and Bergeron, or on the second line with Pastrnak. So seeing those three together, I think it does take some of the shine off of this trio. The other thing that sort of has me hesitant to make a move in the short term is that we really haven't seen things kind of settle down on the power play. Since McAvoy has been back, we've seen some of this 5 forward setup. We've seen some of Lindholm and McAvoy out together with power play 2. And I think late in the game, we saw DeBrusk swapped out for McAvoy on that top power play. So, I think we need some more data points here before we're going to take any drastic steps. I imagine by the time Brian and Elon are on the show, this weekend, we'll have a few more games. I mean, they only have 2 this week, and they're very busy. But hopefully we'll have a stronger sense of where things are going. But my sense right now is just, to hold until we have more information. I don't think you want to lose a valuable asset just because there's a little bit of uncertainty about sort of what comes next.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Krejci, yes, he's a number 2 center, but I think of all the number 2 centers in the league, he's probably one of the ones you want to own because of the firepower that can be dropped down to his line. And the Bruins being much better than I think a lot of people thought they would take a step back this year, but he's been good. So, I mean, I think must roster depends on the depth of the league that you're talking about. But I think in general, he's going to be an appealing option in most leagues if you pump him out to free agency. So I would be concerned about that for sure. But I agree with you too, that I'm not convinced that this is where this is going to settle. And I would certainly, with DeBrusk, I would be wanting to hold because he seems like he's found a new gear this year. He seems like that was a really difficult time with him under Cassidy's thumb. And he just seems like he's free now. And he's kind of living up to a lot of the potential that some people have thought he's had. And he's gotten that opportunity. He's done a good amount with it. I mean, shooting more than ever. We've never seen him shoot like this. I think that was mentioned on the main show, the mega show. And yeah, I think that he could easily get a line shuffle back up playing with some of the elite players. So again, I don't know about a must hold, but you have to think about if this guy is in free agency, are you going to want someone who might have exposure to those top players in Boston? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think even with this tough schedule, 2 games this weekend, busy days, 3 games next week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which are the busy days thanks to American Thanksgiving. He might be kind of a tough hold for a while, but if at the end of those 5 games it shakes out that, he's back in that top spot, then you would really regret losing him, just so that you can squeeze in a couple games from some, scrub off of the waiver wire that, may or may not have an impact. You don't want to regret having a drop. So, I think I'm a hold for the time being. All right. A couple more topics here for us. We cannot let the show go by without talking about King Arthur Kaliyev, or as Jacabs in the patron Discord said, Uzbek Prince Kaliyev. We got to give him some credit. Talk about where he's come from. But Kaliyev scored twice on 5 shots against the Flames on Monday, including one on that second power play, which has elevated him to 6 goals, 7 assists on 39 shots, 13 points in 17 games. He's done all of this without breaking 14 minutes in any game he's played this season, mostly from the bottom 6, mostly from line 4. His most common line mates this season have been Blake Lizotte and Brendan Lemieux, and Power Play 2 with Arvidsson, Deneau, Moore, and Dursey. Power Play 2 was rewarded for their efforts in Monday's game by being sent out first later on in that game, and they did end up with 54% of the power play time on ice. They've held the advantage in power play time 3 other times this season. But when the lines were shaken up to effectively generate offense in the third, it was Grundstrom replacing Velarde on line 1, and Kaliyev stayed on line 4. So despite his heroics, it didn't seem like he was getting rewarded a whole lot. I wanted to ask, because again, I think you have some insight here. Is there any reason to think that this crazy efficiency can continue? Can he be on this 62-point pace? Is he by far the most interesting line 4 power play 2 guy in the NHL? Or do you think of him as maybe an ad hold for his Wednesday, Friday schedule remaining this week, and then come Saturday, he's a guy that you can cycle out and not miss a whole lot?
Yeah, a lot of good questions there. First of all, I'm so mad I didn't get him. I was going to set a timer for midnight because I identified LA as such a good schedule, and he was my top target for the week. But I chose sleep, and I lost out on Kaliyev and ended up with Grundstrom, which hasn't gone so well so far. I think in a shallow league, I think he could be a drop, but I think there's something there. I'm not sure that we can say he's going to be so good, but I mentioned this over the summer on our team preview at Fantasy Hockey Life. Kaliyev has the talent to be a top line forward. He is an excellent shooter. He's an excellent offensive player, but when he came into the league, he was terrible defensively. He basically cared not at all about that part, like a lot of young offensive forwards did. And they kind of forced him to get better at his defense. And he did. He was one of the best 2-way forwards on LA last year. And there weren't a lot of points, but he wasn't focusing on that. So this year, I wouldn't be surprised if he keeps getting that opportunity. He's shown he can play in kind of any role they put him in, which is a good thing for the coach. I could see him kind of getting a stream spot into a better opportunity as well, especially with an injury. And as I mentioned, he has the talent to put a lot of pucks in the net. So he's obviously not doing it right now with this opportunity. I think if you can hold on, then he's someone who could surprise you. And he obviously showed with limited opportunity that he was able to do a lot on the first night of the week. I would definitely hold this week and, see if you can hold longer if he continues to produce, because he's someone who could bump up to, be in the top 6. And I think that ultimately that could be his rightful spot, even if it doesn't quite happen this year. So if it's a pretty shallow league, then obviously stream him out. But if it's like a keeper, if you could hold him longer, Arthur Kaliyev is definitely somebody who should be on your long-term radar.
Yeah, really interesting. I think deployment wise, this is a really fascinating situation where almost never are you talking about a guy in his slot in the lineup as being really fantasy relevant. So cool to see, and hope he can keep it up. The Kings do have a pretty favorable schedule next week with at least one off day game. So might be worth a hold to see if you can get him through next week. All right, and then we wanted to talk about a cold streak here. I have 3 cold defensemen who are in slightly different situations in a way that I think makes them interesting. And I want to see how we would rank them in terms of their appeal, who you want to hold on to, who you think has the best chance to rebound. Those are Moritz Seider, Evan Bouchard, and Shane Gostisbehere. So just kind of running through quickly the player, their deployment, their stats for the season and the last 5 games. So for Seider, you got him as on the top pair with Ben Sherratt. He's on power play 2, at least for now. No goals, 5 assists, 27 shots, 33 hits, and 35 blocks on the season. 3 assists and 7 shots in the last 5 games. Then you got Evan Bouchard, who's on the second pair with Kulak, power play 2. Although we're always sort of wondering, can he maybe usurp Tyson Barrie? But I think Tyson Barrie had at least one. I know he scored twice. I don't know if they were both on the power play. So it seems like he's solidified that position for now. Anyway, no goals, 5 assists, 36 shots, 29 hits, 16 blocks on the season. No points and 8 shots in the last 5. And then Gostisbehere, who's had, the most offensive success, he has goals, unlike the others. He's playing way down on the third pair with Josh Brown, but he is on power play 1 with JJ Moser. 4 goals, 3 assists, 35 shots, 7 hits, 23 blocks, 2 assists, and 6 shots in the last 5. Out of those guys, who do you see? All of them are kind of struggling lately, not doing a whole lot of production here. Who do you feel like is the one you would most want to hold, and are you ready to let any of them go?
Well, I think for me, it's definitely Seider. And no, it's not because I'm talking to the Red Wings homer here. It has nothing to do with it, Lewis. You didn't influence me. But I just think he's simply the best defender on his team and maybe even the best dang player on his team. And I wanted to add a little bit more context. You threw out a lot of numbers, which was helpful. But I would also add that in terms of cupful points per game, they currently stand as Gostisbehere first, 4.53, Seider second with 3.68, and Bouchard last with 3.07. And as you mentioned, the one who's done the most scoring is Gostisbehere, so the others could have some positive regression in terms of their points, which would certainly help their average. So that's something to think about. But the other thing is that Seider getting a lot of strong periffs to boost his floor. And Bouchard, as you mentioned, I think his spot is just the most precarious, right? Because I think he's good enough to be running the power play and kind of be in all situations kind of guy, but you just don't have Tyson Barrie on your team unless he's running your power play. You just don't do it. So that's going to really limit Bouchard's opportunity. So he's last for me. So it really comes down to between Seider and Gostisbehere. And I mean, Arizona should be showcasing him to get all the points he can for a trade, right? But I'm just not sure if that's going to happen. And Moser certainly is someone who's shown to be capable, and, that might limit Gostisbehere's opportunity. Plus, just Arizona in general might limit his opportunity and availability for points, although they seem to still getting them, and they seem better than we all expected. But for me, I like the high floor and the positive regression that we should see from Seider to get in on more points. He hasn't really gotten in on much at all. And then Gostisbehere, just because he's an offensive guy and he's already kind of doing it. And Bouchard third, I like him a lot, but I just think that as long as Barry's there, he's not going to get the proper opportunity, and that's disappointing. So that's my order. Lewis, what about you?
Yeah, if you're not paying Barrie to run that top power play, then what exactly are you paying him for? I think that's a really good point. And that is also why I have Bouchard down on the bottom. High hopes for him, certainly. But ultimately not going to pay off in a one-year league here. If you got him in a keeper, hang in there, because obviously this is a guy with a ton of talent. He's just got to wait for that opportunity. I really struggled with who I wanted to put ahead with Seider and Gostisbehere, and I kind of took a cop-out and had them as sort of being even. Maybe the thing that tips the scales for me is if Jacob Chychrun comes back at any point, I think that's going to be another factor that's going to put some pressure on Gostisbehere's available time. But Filip Hronek, has been doing pretty decently on that top power play too. It's just, I don't know. It's so close. I really was feeling like I was splitting hairs. So I'm going to cop out and say Seider and Gostisbehere are about even for me, due to, all of the things that you mentioned. Seider's peripherals give him an advantage if you're in a pure scoring league. No doubt. I think you put Gostisbehere ahead, but he doesn't give you a whole lot in the hits, and, blocks are only so-so compared to Seider. He's got about half again as many. So yeah, really, I think it depends on the fit. Just like anything, you want to know your settings, know how your league works, and choose wisely between those two. But I think they're both very much in the same tier for me, and a step ahead of Bouchard, despite all being kind of cold here. Would love to see Seider back on that top power play, but I think he's going to have to earn it. So we'll see if that happens. But as of right now, yeah, looking at those two as pretty close together. All right, Victor, so much fun. Thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate you stepping up and filling in for Ben here. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, you can listen to our podcast, Fantasy Hockey Life. Jesse and I talk a lot about Dynasty and about prospects. And, we leave a lot of the day-to-day, week-to-week stuff to the Keeping Karlsson, our friends at Keeping Karlsson and Short Shifts. So we try to take a little bit longer view. We also bring on scouts and talk about that kind of stuff. So you can find us in your podcast aggregator of your choice, and you can follow me at Victor Nuno 12, VictorNuno12, and Jesse at Fan Hockey Life. Thanks, Lewis. It was a blast.
Outstanding. Well, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody who has chosen to listen. Please be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK. You can find Brian and Elon at Keeping Karlsson, Dave Betton of the Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme. Also recommend you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, and at Game Day News NHL. All organized very nicely at the site GameDayLineTweets.com. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. John Reed is our digital media producer. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.